NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg doubling down on support for Ukraine, saying that the alliance will not pull back any aid as Kyiv prepares to brace itself for a dark and harsh winter. Foreign ministers from the military alliance are convening in Bucharest for a two-day meeting to discuss the war. And they're not the only ones. G7 members are also set to meet on the sidelines of the gathering to discuss ways to boost Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
I'm absolutely certain that when foreign ministers meet today and tomorrow, the message will be that we need to sustain and step up our support, not least when it comes to, for instance, air defense systems to help Ukraine defend themselves against all the air and defense attacks they are now facing.
Mr. Stoltenberg also slammed Russian President Vladimir Putin for using winter as a weapon of war in the face of mounting losses on the battlefield. Air raid alerts have since been issued across all of Ukraine following warnings by officials that Russia was preparing a new wave of missile and drone strikes. It comes after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that attacks this week could be as bad as the last, which left millions of people with no heat, water or power. For more, Rosie Burchard joins us live from Brussels. Rosie, the NATO chief is suggesting increased military support for Kyiv here, but with energy woes continuing to climb in the country, can we expect other forms of aid perhaps to be discussed as well?
Well, NATO ministers have been filing in for the past hour or so, and what really struck me is that quite a few of them have, in the last couple of weeks, been themselves in Ukraine, seeing firsthand the fallout of these attacks. I heard Belgium's Foreign Minister Hadja Labib, for example, talking about the fact that it was snowing in Kyiv. So we're talking about sub-zero temperatures and parts of the country plunged into darkness. Now, what will this support actually look like? Well, we heard different messages from different ministers. So, for example, NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg, as you mentioned, pointing toward air defence, and that is certainly something that Kyiv has put at the top of its wish list. The last time that the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba was at a NATO ministerial meeting, he came with a very clear wish list. He said 3 words: weapons, weapons and weapons. I was there. I can recall this real clear message from Kyiv. Now he says he's refining that list. He will now ask for air defence, he'll ask for tanks, and he'll ask for armed production lines. Now, beyond those weapons, which of course, as I said, Kyiv is asking for very clearly, we're also looking at different types of support. So Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, for example, well, she talked about generators to replace lost energy infrastructure. She talked about ambulances. Then meanwhile, for Canada, a country which of course has experience with winter in terms of winter exercises for armies and so on, well, they have been donating winter gear, so goggles, warmer clothes for soldiers. And then lastly, we heard from Lithuania's foreign minister, who said that Ukraine has been specifically requesting parts to replace broken energy infrastructure, parts which are only available in NATO eastern flank countries like Lithuania due to that shared Soviet history. So he said Lithuania has already taken the lead there to share some of those parts, and he expects other NATO eastern flank countries to do so.
Meanwhile, Rosie, we're also hearing some talk on Ukraine's application for NATO membership, that it may also be on the agenda.
Well, Bucharest is a very symbolic city for Ukraine's NATO aspirations, because it was there in Bucharest in 2008 that the alliance adopted a statement, a declaration, in which they said, we agreed that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. And of course, you'll recall that Russia used Ukraine's ambitions toward joining NATO as a pretext for this invasion. Now, Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, spoke about those aspirations on his way into these talks. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We stated that Ukraine will become a member. I expect allies to reiterate also that position. However, the main focus now is on supporting Ukraine. We are in the midst of a war, and therefore we should do nothing that can undermine the unity of allies to provide military, humanitarian, financial support to Ukraine, because we must prevent President Putin from winning, and we need to ensure that Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation.
What he he did not say, what he did not spell out, is that in that time, since 2008, well, Ukraine has not made much political progress in terms of actually securing that NATO membership, because it would need the support of all existing NATO members, and there's some complexities there, not least now given the fact that there is an active land war being fought on Ukraine's territory. Now, Ukraine still has work to do also to meet other eligibility requirements. That's less and less of an issue in terms of the compatibility of militaries, given that Ukraine's troops are fighting every day on the battlefield. But there is also some work still to do when it comes to, for example, curbs on corruption. So NATO there reiterating its message that its door is open. However, don't expect any sort of big breakthrough or announcement when it comes to Ukraine's membership at these talks. We'll get a reiteration of that message that support to Ukraine will continue, but at this stage it is only support, and it will not be any sort of actually welcoming Kyiv into the folds of the alliance.
Rosie, thank you for that. Rosie Burchard there reporting to us from Brussels.
Russia's war in Ukraine has resulted in the biggest shake-up in 30 years to Moscow's economy, and that has created huge challenges for government and business. But some also see an opportunity in the chaos, as foreign suppliers who once dominated the market have either chosen or been forced by sanctions to leave. Stuart Smith has more in the second of a two-part report from Moscow.
When it comes to alcoholic drinks, vodka is most often associated with the Russian palate, but beer is equally popular by volume of alcohol consumed. Russian beer has always competed with well-established foreign brands. That was, at least, until 2022, when supply chain disruptions, sanctions and PR concerns left a gaping hole in the market. This Moscow-based brewery is trying to fill the gap and quench that demand.
With an exit of big beer players, distributors and import beer, we had an opportunity to expand many restaurant groups in Moscow, St. Petersburg firstly, and all over Russia. Our partners who didn't want to work with us of full price, because we are high level beer, they came back in March and asked us to give them beer because there was no way to get import.
That's not to say they haven't had challenges themselves, specifically with sourcing raw materials. Good business relations in Finland and new trade routes through Kazakhstan got them through the summer, but some of those routes are no longer an option. They're experimenting with a greater quantity of Russian ingredients. Wheat and barley can all be sourced here, but the country is still developing its capacity for processing. And then there's the brewery's complex equipment. That's from Germany, an Italian bottling machine. One breakdown, a potential recipe for disaster. But there's confidence here, they'll make it through.
In that unstable world, we don't have any guarantees about equipment, but we have also good professional people which work in this factory. That people too many times help us fix all problems. So that's the reason why we didn't call to Italy, to Germany or England to help us, because we can fix all.
At this brewery in Moscow, they're confident that should something break down, including foreign equipment like this English filtration machine, they would be able to repair it. But other industries in Russia don't have that luxury. Should something break, then they're stuck, and that is causing problems. The aviation industry, unable to get original spares, can now legally use substitutes. And the opening of a new cancer ward in Moscow had to be postponed after it became impossible to manufacture new equipment with cutting-edge technology. Early on, after sanctions were imposed, Russia legalized parallel imports to help, meaning a product can be imported via a friendly third country without the manufacturer's consent. It's how the Russian Trade Ministry expects Apple's latest iPhones will make it to Russian consumers. Doing so is not illegal under international law, and for most products doesn't violate the sanctions against Russia. But it might soon. EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen has said the bloc is going to take action against those who, quote, take European goods, transport them to third countries and then to Russia. And so, like assembling a piece of furniture, finding all the little pieces that make up the Russian economy looks set to get even harder. Stuart Smith, CNA, Moscow.